Por favor, si no están hablando, por favor, pónganse en silencio, porque si no, hay muchos ecos. Gracias.
Bueno, buenos días, buenas tardes, buenas noches. Me es muy grato presentar este panel, que entiendo es el último de esta edición de la conferencia. El panel se titula Research Collaboration for Progress Towards Achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, Opportunities and Challenges. Y antes de introducir brevemente a los 4 panelistas, yo quisiera que Rosie Smith, que es una de las panelistas, explicar un poco la dinámica que vamos a seguir en este panel, que queremos que sea interactivo y queremos contar con la contribución de ustedes, no solamente como espectadores, sino también como participantes activos de este ejercicio académico. Entonces, Rosy, por favor, te invito a que expliques un poco la dinámica que queremos seguir en el panel antes de empezar.
Sí, muchísimas gracias. Bueno, vamos a hablar de la colaboración internacional con Cuba y las barreras. Entonces, queremos, y después de las ponencias, una discusión con todo el mundo sobre esas barreras y cómo quitarlas. Entonces, yo he puesto en el chat un enlace. Ese enlace es un enlace de Padlet. Si entras en ese enlace, vas a encontrar con una pantalla así. Cuando entras allá, hay una pregunta. La pregunta dice, ¿cuáles son las barreras principales a la colaboración internacional eficaz con Cuba? Si tienes algunas barreras que quieres destacar, que podemos hablar después, lo que tienes que hacer es simplemente hacer clic en el plus y escribir su contribución, su comentario. Si para algunas personas no funcione por la conexión, por estar en Cuba, por cualquier otra cosa, puede poner la cosa en el chat y nosotros podemos añadirlos después. Lo beneficio de ese es que después podemos descargarlo como PDF y compartir. ¿Todo bien?
Sí, gracias, Rosy. Déjenme explicarles también que este panel va a ser, creo que como toda la conferencia, bilingüe. It means that we have 4 panelists. I believe that 3 of them are going to be speaking in English. 1 of them is going to be speaking in Spanish, but definitely we would like their interaction to be in both languages, and we will try to facilitate and do the best in that regard. So having said that, I'm going to very briefly introduce our 4 extreme talented panelists, because what we are going to do is I'm going to read the brief bios, and then we are going to proceed with the presentations that they are supposed to use 15 minutes for each of these presentations. So in the same order that they are going to present, first I would like to introduce Lorraine Collins. Lorraine Collins is an honorary research fellow at the University of Nottingham. Hi, Lorraine, I see you there in the camera. She has a varied background in physics, technology, and public policy. The focus of her doctoral thesis was the history of local government in Cuba between 1959 and 2017. Together with Dr. Morris, she is the co-founder and director of the Caribbean Research and Innovation Collaboration for Knowledge Exchange and Transfer Community Interest Company, CricketCIC. She currently works at the Institution for Environmental Science and shares a local residents organization in her community in central London. So welcome, Noreen. I'm very happy to have you here today. Emily Morris is an honorary senior research associate at the University College London's Institute of the Americas. She previously worked at the Economist Intelligence Unit and Inter-American Development Bank on the analysis of economic policy and performance in Latin America and the Caribbean. Her current research focuses on the Cuban economy. With Dr. Collins, as I explained before, she is co-founder director of CricketCIC. Emily, I believe you are there. I do not see you, but I'm trusting you are with us. Rosie Smith is a senior lecturer in education, De Montfort University. Rosie works on Cuban education with a focus on inclusion and on widening participation in higher education, researching primarily in Granma province, in Cuba, of course. Her work in the UK focuses on collaborative and co-produced curriculum development with disabled and neurodivergent people, and on inclusive communication. She is lead investigator of the AHRC Disability Network, Cultures of Participation for Equitable Development in Cuba and the United Kingdom. Rosie, welcome again. You already explained what is the Padlet exercise we are going to do, and I invite everyone to actually participate on this experience we are proposing to you. And finally, I would like to introduce Jorge Alfredo Carballo Concepcion. Jorge Alfredo Carballo Concepcion holds a PhD in economics from the University of Havana. He works on social and environmental safeguards, risk assessment, cultural and creative industries, and cultural economy. He has a wide expertise as project consultant, collaborating with international organizations from the UN system and civil society. So having said that, welcome again to the 4 panelists, and I would like to invite Lauren Collins to start her presentation. Yes, Lauren, you are muted. You need to unmute the microphone, sorry.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Are you going to show my PowerPoint?
Okay, would you like, okay. Would you like me to share the screen for you?
Yes, please.
No problem, I will. Okay, it will take, I hope, 20 seconds. So let us have some patience. Sure. Okay, please let me know if you can see it.
No. Yes?
Yeah, ahora sí.
Okay.
Okay. So
Perfecto, sí.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll begin. I'm going to talk briefly about cricket, about what we do, and the reason I'm going to talk about it is because it's a good lead into the opportunities for collaboration with collaborative work with Cuba, and of course we come up against lots of problems when we do it. Not if anybody's that's participating, obviously, and that's an introduction to the conversation we'd like to have with everybody. So, la próxima, por favor. I can't see what you're seeing.
Yes.
So Alpha can't see the...
Okay, if anybody can't see, you might try leaving and coming back into the room.
Okay.
Yes. Question for the rest of the audience. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I actually can't. So have you got the second slide up?
Yes.
The case of cricket, why, how, what?
Okay. I can't move mine on at all. Oh, right. Okay. Right. So the whole point is to support projects and research that advances Cuba towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. So why did we set it up is what I'm going to talk about first. Then I'm going to talk about how we actually operate, and finally what we've managed to do so far. We established cricket on the 13th of August 2020. The date might ring a bell, but that was a coincidence. So why did we set it up? Well, we knew there was a lot of enthusiasm amongst Cuban researchers for international collaboration. We knew that there was a real appetite for that. And we knew that by setting up an organisation outside of the universities, it gave us a potential for collaborating with non-university bodies, which would sometimes be difficult from within a university. So we had a wider scope of the projects that we could support. We also knew that there was a lot of interest shown by people in the UK and in Europe, in other countries, that were really interested in working collaboratively with Cuba. And another main factor was it's very difficult for Cuba to access funding, which others have spoken about, and I'm sure others will speak about afterwards. And we felt that there were ways in which we might be able to help with that. So how did we go about it? there were a lot of pre-existing contacts and pre-existing work in Cuba before the foundation of cricket. And this is largely due to Dr. Morris, who has been working in Cuba for many, many years and had built up a significant network and had a lot of experience of working in Cuba. And she wanted to take that forward in a different sort of, in a new way, in a way that would be more effective perhaps than just her working alone. So that was why the Community Interest Company was created. It's registered in the UK. We did consider setting up a charity, but it's quite an onerous thing to do in the UK. And a community interest company, although we have to pay corporation tax if we're not careful, it is simply to administer and suited our purpose. So the first thing was to extend and build the network that we already had, not just in Cuba, but in the UK, so that we could match Cuban partners with partners outside of Cuba to jointly elaborate projects and to apply for funding jointly, which would, we hoped would then allow Cuba access to monies it perhaps wouldn't ordinarily be able to access. We also formed a group of associates, which we're still welcoming new associates. And these are people who we count on for their support, moral support, sometimes donations support, using their knowledge and their expertise, and they're drawn from both Cuba and from the UK. And that's very important for us as a source of support. And we also signed a memorandum of understanding with the Fundación Universitaria de Innovación y Desarrollo, which has recently been set up and exists in order to connect the world of the higher education and research with development of the country, with particular projects that will earn Cuban foreign exchange or which will encourage local development. And we signed a memorandum of understanding with them, and they are hugely helpful to us when we meet barriers or introducing us to the right people or introducing the right people to us. They're very supportive of us, and it has to be said that it's been a transformative thing working together with the Fundación. So what have we done? Well, at the very beginning, when Cricket was formed, we were involved in a project in Guanabacoa, a very rural area, and they were setting up an incubator hub for new businesses. And that's what we were doing at the time that Cricket was formed. One of the things that we're really happy to be involved in was the setting up of the Cuba-Britain Energy Network. And this is a network of people who are working at UCL, at Warwick University, and at IMBRE, which is the Material Science Institute at the University of Havana. And they've been working collaboratively, and they are going to continue to do that. So that was a great thing to be involved in. Emily was also involved with one of our associates, James Warren from the Open University, in producing a course, a future-learn course about Cuba's approach to climate change, which was very successful, a very good course, which unfortunately at the moment is discontinued, but we hear that it may be being released for free, in which case we will be disseminating that. We're also at the moment involved in supporting an effort to commercialize some battery technology, which came about by when one of the IMRE scientists had a placement at UCL, which Cricket supported, and he was able to carry out research there much more quickly than he could in his own laboratory. And he has actually had under the name of the University of Havana, he has registered that as a, I've forgotten the word. Anyway, that's been registered, and that is their intellectual property. And currently we're supporting the commercialization of that battery technology by trying to find a company in this country who will take forward that to market. We're also, in a short while, going to support clinical trials of treatments for Alzheimer's and cancer that have been developed in Cuba. I mention these because these are pipeline things. And we gave a lot of support as well for a Wellcome Trust funding bid to look at the effect of increasing heat in Havana. Now, we didn't achieve that. We failed to get the funding. I mention it because it's a fact that lots of times you don't achieve, you don't get the money that you think you might be able to get, despite doing a lot of work and excellent input from everybody concerned. But that's one of the things that happens when you do this sort of work. Another one which is on the horizon is going to happen is we're looking at supporting Havana in clearing up a city landfill site, which needs work done to it. And we're working with a Belgian foundation who are sending people over there at their own expense to do some work in order to put together a bid for climate change money to deal with that landfill site. So that gives you an idea of some of the things that we're involved in. On the left of the screen, you'll see a bulletin. We produce a bulletin about 3 times a year, maybe 4 times a year, telling people what's in the pipeline, what we've been doing. And you're all most welcome to sign up to that if you want to know what's going on. Right, so the next slide. Challenges. Well, there are a lot, and we all know that. Cuba's access to international funding is very restricted, and I know that the people who are going to speak next will talk more about that. When a grant is awarded, universities in the UK do get money from that for their work. The Cubans don't. And that's a real inequality and unfairness, which is quite difficult to overcome. Many UK universities are risk averse. They know that their banks don't like dealing with Cuba for the reasons that we all know. And this can be a real obstacle. Visa problems when academics from the UK realise that if they've got a Cuban stamp in their passport, they won't be able to go to the United States very easily. That's a problem. And it causes some people, to decide not to engage. For the Cuban side, of course, we know that there's an exit of a lot of people from Cuba at the moment, and this is affecting universities. Academics are leaving the country, and this causes a problem for everyone. And of course, there's an awful lot of competition for less funding than there used to be. So that's why often you have to try very hard to do lots of things all at once and hope one of them comes good. And there are many more, which I'm sure we'll hear about soon. So our website address is there, www.CricketCIC.net, and you can sign up on there to our newsletter and see some of the things that we're doing. And we would really encourage you to have the newsletter, to join our network, because there's all sorts of talents and skills that are needed, and one of them might be yours. Thank you.
Jacqueline, you're muted.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Emily Morris. Please, this is your turn now. Do you want me to share the screen, or it's okay with you?
I will try to do the screen, and if it doesn't work in any way, I know that you've got a copy, so okay. For window, aha. Looks like it's here.
Okay. I would like to remind you that if you cannot access to the Padlet, please on the chat you can put your comments, and then at the end we will go with a question and answer round. So please, Dr. Morris.
Okay, do you all have my my PowerPoint on your screen?
It's there, Emily, but it's not in slideshow format. If you want it in slideshow format, you have to share screen instead of window. Otherwise, you can leave it as it is and just move between slides.
I'll just move between slides. Although I'll just move between slides. I've got wonderful animations, but we won't be able to enjoy that. So, okay, so here we are. Yeah, what I'm going to do, and I'm going to be as quick as possible to try to get there in time, is to describe a research collaboration that I was involved in, which actually led into working with Lauren to put together Cricket. It's actually been going for a decade or more, quite amazingly, and it was called MAS+Habana. MAS being movilidad, accesibilidad, sostenibilidad. Brief Havana mobility, but it's about urban mobility and accessibility, and very importantly accessibility, because that's also at its heart. It was about equality and participation, and the idea that when you're talking about transport policy, you're not talking about vehicles, you're talking about getting people to where they need to be, whether that's being mobile or not. Okay, so, and the other thing to say about it is it's a program and not a project. So it's a program which has been going on for 10 years, it's still continuing, and it consists of a whole series of projects, but also the work that we do in between projects. So we actually started in 2013 with a little grant from UCL, and that was before the UN Sustainable Development Goals were actually adopted. But as you can see here, out of the 17, we hit number 11, obviously, which is about cities, about urban areas, but also health, gender, energy, economy, infrastructure, inequality, and what are the other ones? Yeah, responsible consumption and production, and also climate change, and also number 17, which is alliances for the goals. So we inadvertently are meeting so many of these sustainable development goals. So what I'm going to do is just talk briefly, very briefly, about the opportunities and challenges within the different aspects of doing this research. So I'm going to talk about getting money to do the work, finding partners to carry it out, actually doing the research itself, which is the large thing in the middle. And the reason why I've put it there as so many little pictures is that the research covered many, many areas of mobility. So we talked about how people move around on their feet or in wheelchairs. We talked about different kinds of vehicles. We talked about how urban plans should make accessibility more easy. We talked about the health aspects. We talked about the importance of green spaces and so on. So it was a very multidisciplinary, multi-agency exercise. Then I'm also going to talk very briefly about dissemination and impact. Okay, now this next slide, as you can see, I've only got 5 slides. This is a slide which kind of summarizes the various points. And my intention here is really to raise some of the points, the things that I've learned in the process of doing this. And that is the various opportunities and challenges. So I'm going to take them by theme. So if we start with the opportunities, clearly we were lucky that the UN decided to follow us in having this Sustainable Development Goals, which happened to match what we were doing. But that's very important in terms of raising funds. You know, if you can say that you're meeting the Sustainable Development Goals, but also a lot of the dissemination we've done and the people that we've got interested in the work we're doing kind of arises out of the different aspects there, and particularly urban planning, because just recently, you know, more than half of the world population is now urban, and climate change are key issues clearly. Cuba is also an opportunity because it is such a unique case. And this isn't just in mobility, where, of course, the emphasis on public transport rather than private transport is very, very strong in Cuba. So it's a very special case. And, you know, for all of us researchers, when you're making the argument for why it's important to do the research, if you've got a special case, an outlier, then it's worth studying. And so this is the argument that we make all the way through. The challenges, though, of course, are mainly to do with US sanctions. Clearly, a lot of international development institutions, funds are unavailable. I said, well, Jackie pointed out, I worked at the Inter-American Development Bank. Cuba doesn't exist for the Inter-American Development Bank, nor for the World Bank, nor for the Cooperación Andino de Fomento, nor for the Caribbean Development Bank. All of those are blocked by the US. And, you know, when we're talking about transport, transport receives a lot of money. Infrastructure for transport receives a lot of money from those funds, and Cuba doesn't have any of them. And therefore, it also doesn't have research funding from those places. But also, it's very important to say that, you know, we have really hit against the over-compliance on the part of UK universities, and Helen can talk about this with Glasgow. There was one project which was kind of linked, where we were delayed for a year and had terrible trouble trying to convince the university to do a project involving Cuba as a partner. And it's partly because of the banks. And so whatever you do, you can't do any transfers from UK to Cuba. So that's a really big problem, which runs through everything. And we all know about that, but it really has struck us, you know, when I kept trying to do things and you can't do things because of this. Having said that, I have to say so UKRI funds are really hard to get, but I got funds from UCL, a lot of small projects, from the British Embassy in Havana, and from the Ford Foundation in the US. Now, the problem with the Ford Foundation, although it provided a large amount of money, it's an issue for the Cubans. And we had to explain ourselves over and over again to reassure people that we weren't acting on behalf of anybody in the US. So it did create problems. Moving to the second one, finding partners. In terms of opportunities, we have to emphasize that finding research opportunities in Cuba was, well, we were very, very lucky. The partners that we had were very, very good.